Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting Propagandacast. Lehr again. My apologies for the slight delay between, but again, sudden quick bout of patches rather wipes my replay archive pretty quickly, making it rather difficult, in particular when all of a sudden I have a very specific topic in mind, meaning I want some very specific replays, and then all of a sudden patch, and then scheisse, all sorts of wonderful replays I had gone out the window. But now we're on here, we're going to be having a look at mines. Yes, indeed, Minen. And if I was a really particular cheeky person, I'd be calling this episode Mein Kampf. But I'm not going to do that because that probably end up meaning a lot more trouble than it's worth. Now, we will just be talking about mines, we'll talk about some more specifics, we will talk basically, there are essentially, two types of mines, well, actually three types of mines basically. In terms of damage, when we got the anti-tank, we got anti-infantry. That's sort of more the general, but at the same time there's sort of also a variation in how they basically work and do their job. Generally, though, this only really applies in the anti-infantry department. Of course, the TM-35 mine could sort of be described as a universal mine because it also deals all right with vehicles, but overall it's not necessarily as powerful as, say, the Teller mine or the Regal mine. It's rather more of a direct mine. It's basically a bit like the old company here. You place down a mine, someone ran into it, kaboom, dead, or at least not feeling very well. And of course, for that, there's generally a sort of few ideas, how to sort of place those down, because you have to be rather specific about them. Otherwise, of course, your opponent likely won't be running into them. Right here, noting, for example, this is the cut-off point on Langoraskaya, the general one. Again, the thought might be, where best to place it. You're generally, for example, not going to find much out over here. On the other hand, right here, which is also generally sort of one of the initial approaches your opponent might be pulling on you, so considering the overall layout of the map is not a bad idea. Also noting a second little sort of thing he's sort of combined with, there's a bit of cover here. Not unusual to see an opponent take up cover. So in this case he's sort of, pulled a double one, one of the sort of points your opponent might go for, in general sort of entering from, again when it's come to defending a point areas for mines, but also putting up behind cover, which is also in the cases of these mines not a bad idea. It's also generally the only real mine you can, because the Germans really don't have the equivalent in sort of anti-infantry, and a Teller mine is not really going to do much. A vehicle is not going to be pulling up behind cover and go, yeah, oh, scheiße. So no, not quite that. But with the TM-39 mine, it's actually conceivable and possible. So right here, a nice little double from Donny Chan in terms of mine placement. Of course, this is not the overall only place you can place mine, but again, when you consider placing them, you have to sort of be a lot more specific about how does my opponent actually move. For example, what are the usual number of movements? Again, and that's something to sort of try and pay attention to over a series of matches. You're playing on a map, you notice, oh, they like to go here, maybe I should consider laying down some mines there, for example. There's all these sorts of rules that we're sort of, skimming through here and then having a look at another video afterwards, to sort of go through some further mining details. Of course, another one which is good here, the way he's sort of doing it, is he's also doing it in a way that ensures the opponent doesn't see it. With this particular type of mine, it's like a surprise. You don't want to spoil it for the other one. Unlike an actual surprise, you don't want your person to get maimed or exploded, generally. That's what you want to do with a mine. So again, you don't want your opponent to see it for two reasons. One, of course, is he's going to be able to see it, which of course rather spoils the surprise, tells him there's a mine, but it also tells him to begin watching out for other mines. In fact, there's also a third reason, which is usually, if it's just about to be finished, a rifle grenade can cook it off, and then all of those people working on those mines will suddenly find the mine exploding in their faces. So that's also a part of it. So these are sort of already there a few quick ground rules in your laying down mines. And of course we'll sort of be skipping forward to sort of have a look at them, also sort of more look at anti-vehicle placement of mines. So, hang on. And here we are moving on to the second segment. Right here we sort of notice one of the more common placement of mines, basically, roads. Vehicles in general, when in terms of power thing, will choose roads because they're faster. And of course on a map like here with lots of deep snow around, they're really going to be choosing the roads, for example. And they might be wondering, well, why? Again, that means you're pretty much guaranteed to get a hit with a mine on a road. Generally, that's really also one of the more common tips, mine the roads. Also in this case, it also serves as a choke point. And for these types of mines, in particular the TM-35 mines, again, choke points are great. So again, that also means more likely, you're more likely to get a hit. And again, that's why choke points are great, because again, otherwise, for example, here a huge set of tracks of lines, it's going to be a lot harder to protect where your opponent would be moving through, and of course, that's also less likely to actually have your mine hit off. But, of course, because there's also choke point, it funds together the troops, meaning they're more likely to sort of get more closer and suffer higher casualties due to it, rather than stay out in the open, where they might actually be a bit spread out, and thus, Paul Heinz sets off the mine, but Friedrich, Helmut and Bob gets away safely. So right there again, consider mine placement through that, and again, observe enemy movement, mine roads, mine choke points. Right here again, we see another little trick again, also noting again the general approach of the opponent. He comes from here, where it's likely going to be hitting through, here. Also, again, another double right next to a fire pit on winter maps. That can also pay off. They're going to, yes, it's hot, and then, oh yes, it's still hot, but in a rather different way, and I seem to be missing half my limbs. That kind of idea as well. So, generally, if you can sort of combine mines with other things where your opponent might like to be going through, that's a good idea. Cover, fire pits, choke points, roads. Generally, when it comes to mines, you sort of want to sort of hit the spots where he's more likely to move through. And in any way, sort of perhaps if it's against troops, funnel them together so they take further damage. For example, right here, like where there's barely any movement, you're generally not going to be having much out of mines. Here, for example, would be good. Again, it's sort of a funnel. Again, they have to move through here. Again, more likely you're going to get a guaranteed hit. But also because, again, they're close up, more likely they'll also get a hit there. And again, same with here, good spot. Same with here, good spot. Keep those things in mind and minds when using them. With those little tips already there, you're more likely to get a hit out of a mine, and generally also more likely to get a devastating hit out of your mine. With telemines, of course, you're more likely just to want to focus on roads, but otherwise, pay attention to enemy armor movements when playing, keep them in mind for next time you're playing, where is he actually moving his tanks? Then, mine those up. And also note with telemines, they are not set off by infantry. They again, just the one if cavalry doesn't want to see them. But anyways, you can actually have them standing right there for a moment, and all of a sudden your opponent moves through a tank there, thinking it's a safe area, and then kaboom, oh, scheiße. So in that regard, telemines do also have a few sneaky properties. And with that in mind, there's sort of more of these specific more, so I would say direct blast, contact point, or whatever you call them, mines that sort of, again, tracking on a small specific area, can do some AoE, but generally, they're all really contained to one spot, which of course brings us to the next topic, the S-mines. And we'll just be moving over to those and have a look at them, because there's a lot of fun talk about them as well. And moving on to the other subject of mines, S-mines. It is indeed the more unique German anti-personnel mine, the Sprengminen. Rather unique in it pretty much does little to vehicles. A scout car might take a bit of damage overall, anything bigger than that, it's not going to be touched. So it means very specific anti-infantry. It's also unique in it actually lays down an entire bloody field. It also costs 60 munitions. You actually lay down the fields in bits, which basically means you can actually cancel, say, halfway through and only end up expending 30 out of the 60 munitions. So it's a more of a variable mine. It also has another little thing. They put up these neat little signposts telling them this is going to be a rather nasty ride if they do decide to walk into there. In this case, several Russians learned this the hard way, that the signs mean serious business. And of course, also, this about signs really huge. The signs, they can see the signs of my mines. Everything is ruined, and again, not necessarily in part because you're looking at this angle, the mines and the signs are not always going to be, necessarily that visible, and also because you don't necessarily always have to play them straight there again where your opponent might be moving through. And again, I'm going to be moving then into that territory which is called attention. And again, for example, right here we see a sort of nice spot which is actually going to be dealing nicely with attention, again, out on the flanks. Also noting, in fact, there are different signs here for the mines, with different skulls and such. Yeah, a lot of detail there that went in from Relic, but for example here, this is more the area where you might not, for example, see people just going in to harass and such. In that case, they're actually quite powerful, because an opponent, again, he's just going to be saying, alright, I'll just move in there, sneak in someone, not pay attention, unit moves in, and then walks through the entire field, or at least half the field, gets blown to bits. So in that regard, it's actually quite a nice little anti-harassment weapon, because again, you're more likely simply, because, and this is also the part of it, it's basically a huge field, it's aerial denial mind basically, but also in denial of movement in some regards as soon as he learns of it, because your opponent's going to then be moving a lot more bloody careful once he sees it. He's going to have to require, of course, getting in a mine sweeper, because not something you can so easily deal with as a single mine. So the S-mines in some regards present many challenges, but also many opportunities, depending on which side of the S-mines you're on. And again, in this case, it's a nice anti-harassment weapon. People moves in and gets blown up. And you mean, you can for a few munitions that way cover up a flank. And in that regard, once your opponent realizes, he might be a lot less likely to then harass. Then again, it might force him to be a lot more cautious. At the same time, it can also, as we see here, actually be utilized to pretty much cover an entire point. Again, he's going to have to put in a lot of effort just to get there, and even then, he just denies a huge or large area again, making it harder for him to move around. And even here in the central battlefield again, he's going to be seeing the signs, like he's going to be paying attention, but even then, he's likely going to suffer some casualties as he tries to move through it, or at least somehow deal with it. Even the minesweepers, the minesweeper crews might get wiped out, then all of a sudden again, mines cleared out. And again, that's the thing, if even you have to clear them out while under fire, then, and of course, your opponent will then be rather intent on dealing with your troops. And of course there's the other one, which of course is he might fire a rifle grenade right into the engineers doing the mine sweeping, cooking off the mines and blowing them up. There's a lot to it really there. Of course, one thing is with all the proximity, you might actually set up more mines as they go off, so that's of course a slight unfortunate thing, but that's really a small price to pay for a rather effective weapon when it comes to sort of denying large swaths of territory to your opponent, or at least making him a lot more bloody cautious when moving through the countryside or through the village. In that regard again, the S-mine is simply powerful. It might not with one mine blow up a squad, but several of them will do quite a nasty trick if you not completely wipe it out. They will get them, and also rather effective in actually clearing out retreating squads, and again they'll be moving through an entire field. So the S-mine is in many regards quite powerful. Again, vehicles won't really be touched by it, but infantry will be hurt quite drastically by it. In that regard, the S-mines are really quite a nice little tool. They only cost 60 missions, and again you can basically say I want to just lay down 1 field, 2 field, 3 field, 4 field. So in that regard you can also easily vary how much you want there, and again it can really make things hell for your opponent in terms of how to sort of move around on the battlefield. And again, in that regard, they're a huge asset to a German player, of course, who has to sort of manage large part of the field, and again, doesn't necessarily have the troops to it, and again, it's just effective. It can really do quite a number on your opponent, and again, it's also sort of more of a weapon you can lay down and forget, and you don't have to be so considerate necessarily about, how to place the message at choke point and such. Basically all you need to know, does my opponent move through there? Yes. Mine it. Again, also again, the speed about it, and again, the size it's not necessarily such a huge surprise. So in many regards, to a certain extent, it's a certainly easier weapon to utilize than others. But at the same time, it can also be easily cleared out and easily dismantled in some regards. Of course, there's a bit of a balance there, but overall, quite effective and easily recommendable to German players, in particular the more novice ones. Again, you don't have to sort of lay down a huge Maginot line or Siegfried line. Just a few S-mines here and there can really do a lot to frustrate your opponent and bleed him out. So I'd certainly suggest, players who don't use mines a lot, and particularly German players, begin using them. Keep all of these little tips in mind when utilising them. Again, for German players, just begin using S-mines. They can really do a lot for you and make things absolute hell for your opponent. So, hopefully with this little Propagandacast Lehr, people are a bit more enlightened on the purpose and utilization of mines, how to clear them out, and of course, also keeping a bit of track, and then keep in mind again these little tricks. Also means, you have to be careful around choke points, cover and such, if your opponent has been given enough time, though again, which is also one reason you want to be aggressive. You don't want to give him too much time to put down a lot of mines. And of course, if you do see mines, get minesweepers. Don't linger about, get minesweepers. And begin looking out for those nasty little bastards under the ground. This is Imperial Dane saying cheers, and I hope you learned something from this, and I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.